Hey Saints, just a little follow-up tonight from the last video. Jesus is coming. Um, Thank you for everybody that posted comments. Real fun comments on that video. Even got a call from Brother Brian, OT for Jesus, about it. And, you know, everybody's fired up, not just this video, but fired up for the time that we're living in, right, Saints? Just seems like the Lord's got so many things coming together for September, and Brother Patrick Winfrey there just put out that video with the dreams that he had, and talking about stuff here even in August. And of course, it's a dream. We'll cut him some slack on that, but it sure makes sense what he was saying there. So this is a follow-up video, though, Saints. The comments that were kind of intriguing in terms of what was being pointed out had to do with the Mark version of this passage. And so we've got Mark 6:48 as kind of the key thing. And he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. And about the fourth watch of the night he cometh unto them, walking upon the sea, and would have passed them by. Now, what I did in that last video was we were looking at the three versions of this account of Jesus walking on the water, and there was different elements within each account. And of course, the fun thing is when you've got differences in these, especially the synoptic gospels, but when you get differences in the gospels of the same account, there's usually a little gold nugget hid in there. And we use the framework of the four faces of Christ, which I think is the best framework to explain why there's four gospels and what perspective they're each coming from. So in the Mark account, Mark's gospel was really to the Jewish people, and if you want to say even more specifically, into the Pharisees, Sadducees, the more orthodox Jews that didn't see Jesus as the Messiah at the time, especially because he presented not as the political hero, sort of the rebirth of King David who was going to put down the Roman Empire, but he came as more of a meek teacher performing miracles and all that, and he was harsh against the old established rank and system that the Pharisees had developed and were leading. And so this account, demonstrates Jesus was the suffering servant Messiah, and it points back to the Old Testament to bring some of that out. And it's there, in my opinion, using that framework to show that, yes, this was prophesied that Jesus was going to be the suffering servant. And yet, when you see then the differences in the gospel, like in this one, when Jesus came walking across the water to the disciples, if this is picturing in type and pattern the second coming of Christ, as he's coming across the sea, he would have passed them by, presumably, in this view of the account, sort of not recognizing the disciples. And then when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit, not Jesus, but a spirit, and they cried out, for they all saw him and were troubled, right? So they didn't see him as their friend and leader, Jesus. They thought they saw a ghost in this view, in this account. And so it matches this whole notion of the Mark account showing that the Jewish leaders didn't expect Jesus in the way he presented himself, and this version of this story matches that. And so I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. Now, the other thing that we pointed out in the video was that this notion of the fourth watch was mentioned, and in particular the comments that I thought were interesting were people that pointed out the fact that in the Mark account it said it was about the fourth watch. Matthew, it was the fourth watch, and then in John it doesn't mention the watch. And down here we said, well, that one's obvious in John because Christ's return from God's perspective, which is John's view, is imminent, and so he doesn't mention the watch. And then in the Matthew account, fourth watch of the night, okay, that's the last watch. And in Mark, it was about the fourth watch, meaning probably just before the fourth watch of the night. And again, these are some details, and maybe the pattern doesn't extend to this level of detail, but I think in this case it might. And so if you think about this, people have made the analogy, and I borrowed on that for the last video, that the four blood moons, the tetrad, could be foreshadowing the four watches of the night. If so, the Mark view is Mashiach, or the Messiah, second coming, would be just before the fourth watch of the night. If you read into it, this word that's translated about. And in Matthew, the second coming is in the fourth watch of the night, and then in the John account, it's imminent. And so if you look at it from the blood moon perspective, you're just before the fourth blood moon, and in the Matthew account, you're after the blood moon. So I was thinking about this a little bit more. Well, the fourth blood moon is September 28th. Just before the fourth blood moon is actually the Jubilee on the 23rd. Now, isn't that cool? Which group of Jewish believers are looking for the second world, looking for Messiah because they denied Jesus as Messiah? Which ones are looking for Messiah on the Jubilee? And bam, that was instant and automatic. This Rabbi Kanievsky represents, he's a leader in the Orthodox Judaism, and I had an article up a couple videos ago where he's been saying, Mashiach's coming on the Jubilee. And this article I found when I was going back to look for my original article that I used. This one's even more interesting. It's from the Cool Jew. It's even more interesting here because Rav Kanievsky, Shalita's daughter, wanted to inform all of Israel that her father, Rav Kanievsky, met Mashiach, who told him that there's going to be a great war and that we are very close to the complete redemption, and that the entire process is a matter of a few months. She also said in his name that until Matzeh Shavit, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, of the current Shemitah year, and I looked that up, it just means right after the Shemitah year, which is, the Jubilee, Israel will merit to be redeemed and eternal redemption. Okay, so who knows if you can trust these website blog posts, but it seems consistent with what the other articles said that this Rabbi Cham Kanievsky has been saying. Now, this is supposed to be his daughter actually saying that the rabbi met Mashiach and said that he is going to appear, after a great war. There's going to be a great war, and we are very close to complete redemption. And I thought, wow, there's the fit, because, again, Mark's version of the gospel was to the Pharisee, Sadducee leaders who didn't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. They still don't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. The descendants of the Pharisees are the Orthodox Jews, and they're still looking for Mashiach, right? So our little type and shadow fits really well, I think, because here Jesus would have passed by them and they didn't recognize him and thought he was a spirit that was walking on the water, and they cried out. And so just using our pattern here and borrowing from the fact that maybe these watches of the night are represented by the four blood moons in the Mark account, that we're about the fourth watch. If we're just up before the fourth watch, it means the Messiah's coming is just before the fourth blood moon. and boom, that would land you potentially right on the Jubilee on the 23rd. So according to New Testament eschatology, let's put it that way, the Antichrist is the one that arrives right after the church is gone. You know, made that point in 2 Thessalonians 2:1 through the end, not starting in 2:3, but starting in 2:1 through the end. And then you can make that point in John 5, where Jesus tells the Pharisees and the Sadducees of the day, you know, I come in my Father's name, you receive me not, but another will come in his name, and him you will receive. He's pointing to the fact that the Orthodox Jews are going to accept the Antichrist first in that passage. And there's my fit now, saints. If you push me a little bit, I would say that's the fit, that if the blood moons pattern out, if this type and shadow or this pattern is what was intended, and I'm feeling better and better about it all the time, you could say that that fourth blood moon and after it is when, you know, the majority of the Jews are going to see Christ as Messiah and all Israel be saved. But those descendants of the Pharisees, Sadducees, the Orthodox Jews, are first going to accept the Antichrist as the coming of Messiah. And I think that's what we get in our pattern here. So I think it's just totally awesome, saints. But I guess we'll know if October rolls around and we're still here digging through passages and trying to figure out what's next. But I just thought I'd share that because those questions were fantastic and got me digging back into the Bible again, and I really appreciate it. So God bless you, saints. Hope this was a secondary blessing. I'll put this article, I guess here, I'll cut and paste it right now, get ready. I'll put this article down below so you can check it out, because it's kind of a different slant now that the daughter is saying that the rabbi actually met Mashiach. So a lot of us always thought that the Antichrist would have to be walking around by now, and boy, that sure seems to be the situation. So God bless you, saints. Good night.